Hi, everybody, and welcome back. We are going to be talking about cover letters when going out there and trying to find a job. Cover letters are very important, but I'm going to be really honest with you. This is really easy compared to putting your resume together. There's no question about that. So, but there are important things to be aware of. So let me share my screen here. Bear with me as usual. So let's talk about cover letters. Anytime that you are applying online, most of the time they're going to ask you for a cover letter, and you want to make sure that it is put together in the formal format. Many of you, being young, really don't do many written correspondence, if any, up until this point, in a formal format. In today's world, including myself, we're so used to sending emails, quick notes, texts. I instead of typing out YOU, in a text, I put the letter U. I do that kind of thing as well. But when it comes to finding a job and putting and having a cover letter, and many correspondence within your jobs themselves, you're going to need to know how to put together a formal letter. And so I have attached a document that I put together that is on cover letters. It's the formatting of a cover letter. And my recommendation is download it on your computer and put it in a safe place where you're always going to be able to keep it, because this is a format that you can use for the rest of your life. And it is done in a formal and correct way. If you start changing things like tabbing in on this particular format, tabbing in the first line of each new paragraph, it's not correct. Don't do that. Don't change anything on this format. It is a true formal format for a letter, and use it that way. Don't change anything on it. If you have been an administrative assistant, for example, in the past, you're going to know what I'm talking about. There are actually, you can buy books on how to format formal letters. And again, don't you want the job? So wouldn't you want to make sure that your letter is as formal as possible? So before you put together your letter, you want to make sure that you research the company that you are sending it to. We're going to talk about that in the next area when we talk about interviews. But you want to do research on the company and find out the address and different things like that, as much as possible that you can find out about the company or organization that you're going to be trying to get a job at. Research the position as much as you possibly can. Find out as much as you can about the position so that you know what you're getting yourself into. Keeping the cover letter, as simple as possible and to the point. This is not a place to tell your life story. Just like your resume, don't tell your life story. Once you get the interview, then tell your life story where it's appropriate. And there you go. Don't tell your life story. Things that you want to pay attention, and these are really basic things in the cover letter. Make sure that your page is centered. What I mean by that is not all the information on the top part of the page and then nothing at the bottom. All of the information should be in the middle. On the formatting that is attached to this module, there's a lot of explanation on spacing. I'm not going to go into all of that because it's all written out for you, but follow that because, again, it is formal. This is something I want to point out. When you put Dear Dr. Gruhl, for example, you don't put a comma. That is not correct. It is a semicolon. So that's one thing that people change all the time on this format, and I don't know why. Don't do that. Don't change the formatting in any way. Keep it the same. Things to watch out for on a cover letter: make sure that it's not too wordy. How long should your cover letter be? I'm generalizing, and I'm talking about assistant manager positions, hourly positions. Generally speaking, a cover letter is going to be no more than 1 page. And even on that page, it should be pretty darn quick and to the point. The purpose of a resume is the same as a purpose for the cover letter. It's to get an interview. So don't tell your life story. Nobody's going to read it. Nobody cares. In the interview, that's different. One thing that people forget to do all the time: sign the letter. Very important. Now, if you're signing it and you're sending it in and you're not actually scanning it, feel free to type your name in from the word sincerely or truly yours to where your name is typed out. And in the middle where you would sign it, it's appropriate to type out your name and to put it in a cursive font. That's okay to do if, in fact, you're sending it through email and you're not going to be scanning it, so where you actually can sign your name itself. But don't just leave it blank. Where on the letter itself, where it says enclosure, leave that, the enclosure part of it. You can put a semicolon, and after that you could put resume if you wanted to, but at the same point you don't have to. Spacing, again, on the cover letter format, I've written that all out for you. Be careful as far as your date, and make sure that it is the entire name of the month is spelled out, for example, and you actually have the number, the day, and then a comma, and then the actual year. Your margins, I would keep it exactly the way it's set up. 1 inch from the top, bottom, and both sides. I would not change your margins. Mistakes that folks make on cover letters: no name and title used when the company name is known. So let's say you're sending a cover letter and you know the name of the company. Most of the time you're going to. The name of the company needs to go on that cover letter, and the address. Now, let's say you don't know the name of the person you're sending it to. That's pretty common, and that's pretty normal. Then you would leave that off there, and then you would write "to whom it may concern." And this is how you write it, with the capital letters and the semicolon. However, if they tell you in the ad, send your resume and your cover letter to XYZ company and send it to the human resource director, should you just put human resource director? I hope your answer is no. How do you find out the name of the human resource director? Pretty darn easy. Call the company, or do a little bit of research on Google. It's really easy, as you all Google every single day. And if you can't find it on Google, just simply call the company and say, "Hey, who's your HR director? What's important?" And I know you know this, make darn sure you know, or you get the spelling correct. If you sent in a cover letter to me or a resume to me and you misspelled my last name, and I have people misspell it all the time because this is not a normal spelling for the last name, Gruhl, which is German, the first thing I think of is, this is not the person I want working for me. And boom, if HR doesn't know that I have your resume, I'm throwing it in the garbage. I'm just being honest with you. Do you want to end up in the garbage? The answer, I'm hoping, is no. So be really careful with these things. They may seem like they're little, but they're actually not. Using abbreviations in a cover letter, again, being consistent, as I talked about in a resume. My recommendation is 2 capital letters when it comes to a state, for example. That's appropriate as long as you're consistent. Make sure your cover letter is consistent with your resume and your reference page. Everything is consistent. So if you're doing PA, capital, make sure it is in both places. Emailing a cover letter and a resume. If you are sending, I'm going to back up. You have an ad that you have found on one of the websites, legitimate websites for jobs. It may, instead of having you put it through an ATS system, it actually may say, email the documents to this email address. Doesn't happen that often, but every once in a while I have run into it in the past. My recommendation to you is not to have all those documents separate in separate documents, because it's a pain in the rear end to have to open all those up. And to keep them all together. My recommendation would be put them all together. And so you can scan them and put it all together. Otherwise, I'm going to guess that there is another way to do it in Word, and I don't even know how to do it. And that's an appropriate thing to do as well. Just make sure it's in one document so it makes it easy for the person on the other side. Making sure in your cover letter your sentences and paragraphs are not too long. Again, get to the point. Use as few words as possible. You don't want to tell your life story like I talked about before. Don't use hyperlinks. We talked about that before with resumes when it comes to email addresses. Blind ads, that's a situation where you're not going to know the name of the company because if somebody is currently in a sales manager position at a hotel, for example, and they are no longer going to be in the sales manager position in the next month, and they don't know about it, that means they're going to be fired. And a company may put out a blind ad. That means that they're not going to tell you what hotel they're looking or they're not going to tell you the name of the hotel or give you a great indication about which hotel it is. The reason is because that sales manager or let's say it's a director of sales where there's only one person in that position and they're about to be fired in the next month. What the hotel is doing and the company is doing is going out there and looking for another director of sales so that they're not left without one after they fire somebody. Most of the time what smart companies do, good companies do, is they'll fire somebody on a Friday and they'll have been working for the last month or two to have somebody already in place for the following Monday to have the new person come in. And so that's why companies will put out blind ads where they won't tell you who to send it to. They are keeping all the information confidential, if you will. Size and of fonts, again, we talked about that in a resume. Make sure it's the same as your resume or extremely similar and that looks appropriate. So I'm not saying you never can have anything different, but you want to be sure that it makes sense. Looks the same. Talk about that. And this is as far as trying to get your interview, and of course that's in your cover letter. Don't put your reader to sleep, and that is don't put too much information. What does the industry reader really want to read and know about you? Again, not your life story. Don't be long-winded. Get to the point. Rehashing your resume. Don't just regurgitate your resume onto a cover letter. Talk about on your cover letter why the company should hire you instead of anybody else. That's the important thing. They're not interested in why you should be hired because of who you are. They want to know what can you do for the company and why should they hire you. Mistakes that are also made, again, not researching the company and knowing enough about the company. Sending out form letters, you don't want to, I don't recommend that. You want to, every time you send out a cover letter, you want to make sure it is as detailed and as specific as possible. Failing to proofread. If you watch Friends, Rachel one time was looking for a job and she had photocopied. That's what we used to do back in those days when we didn't have computers to print out our information. You had to go to a printing company. She misspelled a word on the cover letter. Not a good thing to do. Make sure you have somebody else proof it, not just yourself. And that's it. Again, like I said, putting your cover letter together is much easier than putting together your resume. It's not as detailed, but there still are really important things that you need to watch and that you need to think about. You want to stand out from the crowd, don't you? You want to get the job you want, right? Well, the companies or organizations that you're going to try to get a job with are hopefully only going to be hiring the best people that they possibly can. They're not looking to hire a mediocre person. So to stand out, you need attention to detail and pay attention to the things that I've been talking about in this video, as well as doing your own research. And I'm sure there's things I've forgotten to tell you or that I didn't think about. So make sure that you're thinking a lot about detail and standing out and being the absolute best that you can. Until next time, this is Dr. Gruhl. Take care.